today we have Sundar, or Sundar Chaitanya. I don't know, what would you go by?
Both.
Both, great. And he's the president of KCSoc, and he's a second year economics student at Emmanuel. But he's also very knowledgeable in the Vedic wisdom that we speak about at KCSoc. And so he's been practicing Bhakti yoga for basically his whole life. And so he's got a lot to share. And so thank you for doing the talk today.
Thank you, Vivini. Okay, so today's topic is, I don't know if anyone actually saw, but today's topic is finding true love. And this is quite a fascinating topic, primarily because although it sounds very cliche, in everyone's heart, it's something that everyone actually desires. And if we're honest with ourselves, if we're genuinely honest with ourselves, what we'll realize is that we actually do desire love. So before we actually get into the talk about what is love and the science of love as explained through the Vedic wisdom, I think what would be quite nice to do is to get to try and develop some kind of loving friendships with those around you. You see what I did there? And so you can have a little chat with each other about what 3 things would you expect to find, what are 3 characteristics of true love. So if you just have a little conversation with the person around you about... Start off with Ram and Ronak over there. Pavini!
Sorry.
So the first thing I suggested is it has to be mutual or reciprocated. And we had a discussion about that. Can you give an example?
Yeah, we said, I don't know, but we don't know whether it definitely has to be, because let's say you have someone that you really look up to and you have a lot of love for them, but they already know who you are. Like, could that be a situation with that?
Is that deemed true love or
I
not?
don't know, yeah.
Okay, that's nice. So maybe it should be reciprocated. That's good. Anything else?
Acts of service, so where you know, you're acting for them, not looking to benefit from that action, just completely unmotivated.
Okay.
For the other person.
So selfless, being selfless. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very nice. And
Consider that.
Unconditional.
unconditional.
Mm-hmm.
So not conditioned on anything. Since
Anything
irrespective of
temporary.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I mean, especially with like relationships, because we're all human, everyone makes mistakes. So, yeah, I guess true love is love that goes beyond it, like sees beyond those mistakes.
Okay, that's nice. Yeah, and we'll come to it later. But generally, what people say is about unconditional love. That means that you'll start loving people to the point even when they're sometimes very harsh to you and things like that, and can become very toxic. So which is often an argument, and we'll discuss that as we come. That's very nice.
I feel like you guys took basically what was. But we also had unconditionality and service. We had acts of service as well. And then
I said chemistry as well. Or like connection kind of goes into, but I'd say I said having connection without the words, like some things go unsaid, and like being able to connect, that true connection, or the spark people look out for, the butterflies or the fire or whatever it is, that connection, the chemistry, that's what true love comes down to. It's how you both make each other feel.
Okay,
Yes.
that's very nice. Anything else?
We mostly said that. I think we added, just gone out of my head. Support, yeah, and then also like generosity as well. But that's kind of acts of service.
So it's like both things which are not just done for one's own personal gain,
Yeah.
but also done for helping the other person. Yeah, no, that's quite nice, because there's one time Srila Prabhupada, one of our spiritual teachers, writes down in his book that if I serve someone for personal gain, that's business. That's not love, right? If I'm like worshipping God for profit, or if I'm only scratching my friend's back because he's going to scratch mine, that kind of thing, that's all selfish. And so the quality of love is in and of itself must be that it's selfless. And so being selfless, naturally, I thought the word would come up. I thought the word sacrifice would come up. Did you say sacrifice?
yeah, but I didn't know if that was controversial.
Why?
Because I don't know. Sometimes it's not say you're, you know, in a partnership or like a romantic relationship, if one person is sacrificing so much for the other person, you might lose your own values and identity or purpose in life. So there's an idea of having sacrifice, but then I think sometimes it can be taken as, that needs to be taken in, I guess, balance, I guess. I don't know, but I do think sacrificing, it's I don't know, it's hard because like, what are you sacrificing and what...
Which things should be sacrificed and which things shouldn't.
Yeah.
That also links to that point of unconditionality, right? Of someone does something terrible to you, and then should you carry on serving in that same way? So yeah, this is quite nice. One of the things that we were discussing here was what is it? What is love, right? When we say love, what does it actually refer to? Is it just that which is romantic in nature? Is it that which exists between friends? And when we're talking about love in this context, at least for this session, we're defining it as that just relationships, right? Of positive relationships. That's the different ways of love. There's a whole elaboration of literature that the Vedic wisdom goes into, which categorizes 5 primary ways of loving. I don't know, some of you have maybe had this discussion before. There's kind of the neutrality, which is where you know, maybe you see a friend of yours, you don't know them very well, you just kind of nod your head when you walk past in the corridor, you speak on occasion, but it's very, you know, neutral. So that's kind of the ground of love. And then it works its way up until the 5th level of love, which is romantic. So these are different kind of ways of love. And all of this science of love exists, but I think it was Nikita here who was talking about like self-love as well. So that's also something that's very important, because when we're understanding love, part of understanding love is you've got to understand who you are as well as the object of your reciprocation. And so very simply, the science of love comes down to 3 things. There's subject, there's the object of love, and then there's reciprocation between the 2, right? It's not possible to have real, genuine love unless those 3 things are present. Subject, object, and reciprocation. Which is why we can't genuinely love things. Even if someone claims they actually do love something, it's often not a thing itself that they love, but it's often a thing which is associated with the memory of a person that they love, right? Or emotion that they felt towards someone. If we're honest with ourselves, we cannot say that it's things that make us happy. They don't bring real happiness. And so before we go into this thing of happiness and love, the first thing that all of this boils down to is identity. Once we understand who we are, it makes it very easy to understand where we're going to go in terms of love and how to understand love and the dynamic of relationships between 2 people or more than one person. And so at least we've got to understand what an individual is themselves. So the way we're going to quickly go through this discussion is we're initially going to talk about identity, then after that we're going to talk about purpose, and after that we're going to talk about love. Okay? So hope that makes sense with everyone. There's often this idea that love is a cruel thing. People often say this. You know, having love in this world is often very cruel. It's often a bad thing. You know, it's not real. It doesn't actually exist. And often, after very bad experiences in life, we also come to these kind of conclusions, right? At times, that there's no such thing as real love in this world. And the reason for that is because often what we're looking for is not actually in this world, right? The things that we're looking for are actually higher. And so this is the way that we go from identity to purpose to love, like going through that journey. Okay, so understanding our identity. We've already had this several times, this discussion in KCSoc. But if we were to understand our identity, how would we go about doing it? Okay, I would introduce myself. I'm Sundar. I'm a 2nd year econ student at Emma, and I enjoy cooking, playing squash, and reading. Like, is that really me? What would you say? Discussion.
Do you play
Ideas.
squash?
I don't actually play squash, but Arthur, if you're watching, I enjoy playing squash with you. Anything? What would you say? Is that me? Is that the real me? What are those things?
I guess probably not, because they're like things that are temporary that will change.
Okay, those are things that are temporary, they're not. So those things may change, but I am still me.
Exactly.
Right, very nice. Anything else? Material attributes, are they the self?
I feel like those things are conditional on like your situation. Like those are the things around you that you like to interact with most often. It's not actually what you are.
So it's defining my position relative to my circumstances rather than the actual object that is me.
Yeah.
Right, really nice, yeah. Anything else?
It's kind of what everyone.
Yeah, then say so.
Just to summarize the 2 points, you're just picking on me, but it's like, I guess, you know, if you were to identify as someone who, like, with your name or like a hobby or something, well, your name has changed, right, and can change, so does that mean, what does that say about your identity? Obviously something more than that. Same with like, you like squash one day, another, you know, in a couple of years time you might not like it. So then it's like, if your identity, a lot of us identify it as something constant, or something that we feel like is something that stayed with us as we've aged, or like grown older, or as we've gone through different experiences and transitions in life. There has to be something that can withstand all those changes in life. Because if you're identifying with something like that, then you're kind of nothing really, because these things can keep changing. So it's not constant.
Yeah, really, really nice point. So you combine those 2 points, you know, in a really eloquent way. That's good. So this idea it's something that we've heard many times, but what we actually have to do is we have to start internalizing that over time. It's so often that we define ourselves relative to our circumstances, things that are temporary, things that are not actually us, that we don't understand who we are, and then we become very lost. Because if you want to understand purpose, you need to understand who you are, right? If you understand where you need to go, you first have to understand who I am, what's my original nature, what kind of things do I like. And it's all too often that we just forget. You know, we're so stuck in, it's the nature of society to constantly compare and see what other people are doing and be told what to do. And they say that the most dangerous phrase in the English language is that we've always done it that way. You know, this is the way we've always done it. We've always done it this way. So what we do is we kind of get into this rut of, you know, I should do this, and then I must do that, and then I must do this. We start comparing, and as soon as you realised, I've defined me based off things that are not me. You know, I'm defining myself based off a sport, squash, external to myself, or my subjects, or, you know, these things, they're actually not me. They're just things in my environment around me. You realise that you forgot to define the actual object that you're looking at, which is the self. And so sometimes we get so lost in those kind of other identities. I'm not saying those identities are not real, I'm just saying that they don't actually capture the real essence of who one is. They're real, but they're temporary. They're real and they're temporary, and they don't actually reflect the real individual, the deepest essence of the individual. And what the Vedic literature goes on to elaborate is that this body that we often identify with is made of matter. Matter in and of itself is inert, it's inanimate, and it's unconscious, right? And we are actually characterized by life. We have consciousness. You all have thinking, feeling, and willing. You all have that ability to be conscious, be consciously aware of something. And so this body itself, which is just matter, isn't all that makes up us. But our real self is something deeper, that which is empowering this body with life, which is bringing this body to life, which is empowering us and filling us with consciousness. That's the real self. And the Vedic approach is always to call that the Atma, or the soul, but that which is empowering this body, right? It makes sense, you know. Think of it as like a puppet is actually in and of itself, it does not move, it does not have that ability to move. But as soon as you fill it with a hand, and you can actually make it, you know, talk and move and all kinds of things. So in that same way, as soon as we leave this body, the body is still present, right? The body is still there, but it's not functioning. The functions are not actually happening. The brain is not braining, the heart's not, you know what I mean? It's not actually doing its thing. The brain's not braining, the heart's not hearting. It's like everything is there, but the process is not actually happening. Why? It's because there's no life force, there's no empowerment of life which is present. And so the body itself is still there, but the functions are not happening because there's no life. And that's because there is something external to the body which is actually providing life. And the real self is therefore that which is not just the body. If you look at like when a person passes away, you'll either bury them or you may cremate, but you never think of burning an actual person, right? The actual person is not there. The body is still there, but the actual person that you love is not actually there. And so when we understand that, we try and, it's a somewhat difficult concept to digest because we are so used to identifying with this one thing, which is the body. But once you do that, it really transforms your kind of perspective on life. And you realize there's this whole internal dimension, which is actually my real self, which I'm neglecting. And I'm so focused on the external world. And to try and get more knowledge about this, what we often do is we turn to the Vedic wisdom. To get knowledge in general, what we do is we turn to an authority. We had this discussion already once before, but if I said, how many of you have seen an electron? You'll all say, I've not seen any electron. But you all accept that the electrons exist. The reason for that why is because you read it in an authoritative book. And so in the same way, when we look at spiritual wisdom, we turn to texts of spiritual authority, which speak factually based off logic, theory, and validity, and actually can be then tested and applied in our lives. And so when we look to try and understand a little bit more about who we really are in these ancient wisdom texts, they tell us that we have three qualities. It tells that the Atma, the self, is Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Does anyone know what any of those words mean? Remember these things?
I'm guessing
Go on.
Ananda means happiness.
Ananda means happiness, yeah, very nice. So the soul by nature is eternally full of happiness. The self by nature is eternally very happy. Very nice.
Eternal.
Yeah, so Sat means eternal, eternity, yeah. Anyone know what the other one, Chit? Chit means full of knowledge, cognizant. If you look at the self and you strip away all of your identity, what you realize is you naturally have a craving for eternity. You don't like the idea of cessation of the body or death because you're actually not the body, you're actually eternal. You naturally always desire knowledge and you always desire happiness. I mean, the way you're sitting with one leg over another, the way I'm sitting, the way Ronak's sitting, these, and you're sitting completely different to me. KCSoc's put a coat on her, right? Like, why have they put that coat on them? You know what I mean? It's completely different. But why? Why have they done that? Why have you done that?
Felt like it.
Exactly. No, but the reason is,
comfortable.
it's more comfortable. Every action you do, this is a very, very interesting thing. And you'll now that you've heard this, it might actually change your perspective. But every action you do it because you think it's going to give you happiness. There is nothing you voluntarily do. Like I'm moving my hand now because I think it's going to make more sense to you all. So I think it's going to make me happier, right? It's very weird, But you do anything that you do because you think it's going to give you happiness. There's an aphorism that these wisdom texts give us, which is Atyantika Sukha Pravritti and Atyantika Dukkha Nivritti, which is everything you do is either to maximize happiness or conversely to minimize the stress, right? Why does one student do their homework straight away and another student does it right before the deadline? The first one thinks, if I get my homework done now, if I get my supervision work done now, then I don't have to wait the next 2 weeks and I can just relax and enjoy, right? So he thinks that by doing my work now, I'll be happier. And then you look at the other student who procrastinates their work until the end. Why do they do that? Because they think that if I, take it easy now, then I'll actually get more happiness. Whereas if I do my super work now, I'll be more distressed. That's what they think. And so everyone does everything to become happier. There's an economist called Francis Edgeworth, and he basically defines man as a pleasure-seeking machine, because every action you do is always done to seek pleasure. And this is a similar concept with the Vedic wisdom text give us, which is that we are rasa-seeking, ananda-seeking, happiness-seeking by nature. We always desire happiness. And so everything that you do is always for that. be it the smallest action that you take. Someone takes an early difficulty because they think it's going to make them happier. Someone avoids difficulty because they think it's going to make them happier. But no one does anything genuinely believing that in the long term it's going to make me, or it's going to fill me with distress. Yeah, go for it.
Do you think it's innate, or is it learned, or can it be changed?
This, like,
as in is the pleasure seekingness.
I think it's the pleasure seekingness is innate. However, the way that one seeks pleasure, I think that can completely change.
Okay.
I was talking to a friend of mine recently who's now 3 years sober, and they were telling me that 3 years ago, they used to constantly think that to become happier, I need to drink. That was just like, they were programmed to think like that, that's what society was telling them. So they were always thinking like that. And now, they were saying that like, they've never actually drank in 3 years and they're much happier than they were before. So if you look at before and after, they're both pleasure seeking at both times. But the only difference is the manner of seeking pleasure has changed. So yeah, I mean, like even right now I'm itching myself. That's because I'm trying to become happier by doing that. You know, like every small thing, no matter how simple it is done to gain happiness. So yeah. Does anyone have anything on that I want to say? I think that's not that counterintuitive. Make sense? Okay. So then, when we go then from identity to purpose, we see very quickly that the purpose is of what we're doing is to seek happiness.
So,
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
You know, then with like service, for example, I don't know. It just feels like ingenuine if it's like, because if every action is for, you know, just happiness, like just increasing happiness, and ultimately then service would be for that as well, right? Like technically.
Absolutely. I think it is, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
See, if you're doing service so that you can then gain or exploit from something, if you do service to someone with the motivation that you will become happier, that's your goal of going into it, right? That by doing this I can get something out of it. Then that is quite ingenuine. But if you serve someone and you actually feel more content at the end of it, I mean, you're doing so many things in Embrace, right? How do you feel after you've raised or you've helped, raised funds or you've helped people? How do you actually feel?
That's good.
You feel good, right?
Yeah.
But is that a bad thing? That you're feeling happiness, is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, right? So it's whether you're attached to the seeking of the pleasure, or you're doing it to actually find some deeper contentment. There's levels of what is happy. You can give me chocolate and I'll be happy, for example, or you can actually help me avoid some difficulties in life and I'll also be happy. But there's levels to that as well. And so yeah, our purpose is actually in finding happiness when we do whatever. We've had that discussion probably several times before, and sometimes we stop there. But what we don't understand is that happiness is not just found in things, right? There was a book written, I'm forgetting the name of the author, How to Win Friends and Influence People. What's the name of the book?
Is it
Dale...
author?
Yeah. Carnegie, I think. Dale Carnegie. And he writes this book about how to win friends and influence others. And he actually was in such distress in his life that he couldn't imagine living. And so he ended his own life after writing that book. And you'd think an author that wrote such the title of the book, it would not, why is that kind of contradiction appearing? But it's because it's not just in those kind of name and fame that we get ourselves that we feel happier. It's not just in monetary endeavors that we'll feel successful and we'll feel happy. Don't get me wrong, if you earn money, I'm sure it'll stop some problems in your life, right? I'm not saying if you take care of your health that you'll be miserable always, but those things won't give you complete happiness. The kind of happiness that they give you is characterized, the happiness that things can give you, as sometimes half happiness or incompleteness. And you'll probably see that, right? I mean, going to a very basic analogy, when I was a kid, I remember going with my parents in a store and there'd be some kind of toy or something that was irresistible in the moment. Like, it looked so amazing. I remember there was a Spider-Man piggy bank, which I still have memories of. I wanted it so much. It was in Wilkinson. I was walking past and I was like, this Spider-Man piggy bank looks so nice. And I really thought that, like, if I had that I'd be the happiest person in the world in that moment.
Did you get it?
Yeah, I got it. And guess what? I wasn't the happiest person in the world afterwards. I think I put money in it for like 2 days and then kept on taking the money out and putting the same money back in it. And then after 2 days, I think I moved on to the next toy, which was a kind of car that you pulled back and it went forward.
Yeah, but those are actually cool though.
And then I played with that for about 3 days until I broke the spring, and then I don't remember what happened afterwards.
Do you still have the piggy bank?
I don't know where that piggy bank is now, but you see the point, right? That things we think by having this I'll become so happy, and you've probably had things like that even recently. A friend of mine was saying that he got a jumper, and he was telling me about this jumper that he was going to get for like months. I think he wore it like 5 times, and then he never spoke about the jumper again, you know? And so it's that kind of thing. We always think that things will give us pleasure, but they don't actually. Because the happiness that's characterized by things is incomplete, and it's temporary, right? So you can very clearly observe that on things like, whenever you try and see in your own life, just experiment, whenever you really wanted something, note down when you really wanted it. Did it actually make you completely happy, as in to your core, and how long it actually made you happy? You know, these things, if you observe, you'll generally see that with things they're not able to go that deep. Whereas relationships with people provide much deeper happiness. If you observe in your life, the times, the memories with friends, the laughter, it doesn't have to be like 50 million people, just 1 or 2 people are there. And you know, how enjoyable those times were. And even time that you spend with yourself, which is why also self-love is counted. The relationship with oneself. Not just using things in the moment, but actually being present, you know? And you actually notice that you are there. Because often what we do is we are so forgetful and so attached to things that we forget even our very own self, the person that is us. But if you observe, the times that you are most joyful are always those times with people, even if that person is yourself, right? That's actually those times that you're most joyful. If you think about your memories with people, you know, I don't know, the kind of activities you did. And so our purpose is not just finding happiness, but the purpose of the soul and the actual fundamental characteristic of the soul is to love and to be loved. It's what every individual seeks. It's to love and to be loved. And, you know, no matter what philosopher it might be, right? They might say all kinds of things about, oh, you know, your religion this, and this is what I believe in, blah, blah, blah. In the end of the day, they're always writing about how they're seeking love, how they want love, right? No matter who it is, you might have a really philosophical argument with them at one point. And then you realize that in their day-to-day lives, they're actually looking for love, you know? Every individual, they can lie all they want, but everyone desires to be loved. Not necessarily romantic affection, but just love, you know, genuine love between humans. And that's actually the nature of reality. I've seen so many times with people that, you know, very strong atheists, and they like to debate with you about the existence of God and things like this. And then afterwards, you know, you realize that they've said all of these things, but they actually want love. They say all these kind of arguments about you don't need this, and we're all rational, and we don't need something. And then all of a sudden, they'll see someone that they like, and then all of this rationality disappears. You know, and they become the most irrational creatures on the planet for love. You know, people go to such endeavors to find love. You would already know this. You'll see this in life. Just how much people try to be loved. What kind of things they'll do. How far they'll go out of their way. Because it's actually the characteristic desire of any living entity, is to love and to be loved. And so, us as individuals, what we're doing now is not just trying to maximize happiness, but we're actually trying to maximize happiness through finding real love. And the nature of that love is explained in different ways. The Sanskrit word for love is prema, and it's often associated with several things, which we'll describe now. So I said earlier, don't know where I put my pen. I said earlier that there's different kinds of love, and I just wanted to elaborate a few of those things about the different forms of love that exist, and how we can actually understand the depth of those loves. So I explained earlier neutrality, you might have remembered. So neutrality is one way of loving, when you have just a general positive affection with someone else. Then on top of that there is dhasya, or servitude. You know, you'll do an act of service for them. Maybe you'll hold the door open, maybe you'll just grab something when they need some help. Something very simple. You do an action to demonstrate of service. And then when you add not just servitude, but humour, then that becomes friendship. That's the third form of love. So neutrality, servitude, friendship. You have a little bit of not only I'm going to help this person, but we'll also have some enjoyable time together. And then after that there's kind of protectiveness, kind of maybe more parental, or like an older sibling, right? You sometimes have that, which is the next form. And then finally on top of that there's also intimacy, which is kind of more romantic in that sense. But those are the different kind of things which are added on, different stages of love. But all of these things are considered to be ways of showing love. And in our lives, what we crave is just a place to genuinely be loved. You know, people always talk about home and how amazing home is. It's not the geographical location. Like, no, you're not going back and think like, I can't wait to go to Harrow in particular. Like, Harrow is the best place in the UK. The reason you like that place, I've just doxed you, by the way.
It's one of the, it's not there.
Right. As I love Manchester, but I don't like Manchester because it's Manchester. I like it because there's people that love me that are there, right? I'm so full of love and affection for people that are there, friends, family, right? And so in this way, you know, there's this phrase like home is not a place, but it's a person. Naturally, you actually feel like when you're home and you're well taken care of by your family, and your mother is there and she's maybe preparing something. You know, you feel so joyful in that sense. Actually, that is what defines love. This is it's all about having those relationships with individuals. But our experience of love is often characterized in our own individual lives by those around us that are nice to us, that get along with us, we like them. And then your enemy, because me and you are friends, your enemy is also my enemy, right? And your enemy's enemy is also my friend. That's generally how we go about characterizing things, you know, whether it be on an individual level, sometimes even on an international level. This also applies to political foreign policy as well, right? That country doesn't get along, country A doesn't get along with country B, and country A also doesn't get along with country C, so country C and country B become allies in that regard, right? But it happens to individuals, you'll probably notice this. This kind of affection, where it's for only a particular group, right? Love which is born of enmity, that is actually not considered to be genuine, real love. Because it's, as soon as the common enemy disappears, what happens? You have no reason to be friends with that person. You have no actual, genuine connection there, right? And so friendship born of enmity is not actually considered real friendship. Love born of enmity is not considered real love. And then love which is characterized by me expecting that you should do this, you should do that for me. Love with expectation, that's also not considered genuine love. If I'm expecting, okay, you must do this, this, and this for me, then that's not genuine love, right? If love is only given based off expectation, then it's not considered genuine. If expectations are there, that's okay, but it should not be that the love is dependent on expectations. That's quite important. Expectations can be there, that's not invalid. You naturally should have some expectations. But the love should not be conditional on those expectations. Because then what happens is we don't actually love that person, but we love the things they do for us. And so this is the problem of having expectational or conditional love. So you can have expectations, I expect Ronak to not punch me. I think that's a reasonable expectation. We don't know. We'll see what happens today. But at the same time, if something happens, we get in a fight once. God forbid, that'd be a bad day for me. But and then I stop. Then that's actually conditional. Then you might think, but that's completely reasonable. You should not fight. You should not love someone that's actually fought you. The reason we think like this is because we're so narrow in our approach of love. Think of it this way. There's a story that's often given, which is, does anyone here take a tram often? Or a bus? Or have you ever fought for your place on the train? Or yeah, you've had that, where you've had to quickly rush to the door and kind of barge past someone to get on the train? There's a story which is two people, a very elderly man and a very young man, were both at the tram. They were running towards to get on the tram, and the doors closed, and they were both kind of shoving each other, and none of them managed to get on. And they were quite angry with each other, right? And then somehow or other, the young man, he was like, I shouldn't necessarily create enmity here. Let me just be nice. So he started making polite conversation. And then he was like, oh, what's your name? So the elderly man said his name, and they introduced each other. And then they were like, oh, where are you going? They said, we're both going to the same place. Oh, that's interesting. Why are you going to that place? And then they started speaking, and then they realized they had actually got a common friend. Now, at the beginning, if you were either of those people, and you'd just been fighting for the tram door, and you didn't manage to get on, how would you feel? You feel a sense of hatred or enmity. But when you realize you have a common friend, common connection, how do you feel then? Genuinely, how would you feel in that situation?
I don't know. Free gas.
You feel... I don't know. Says it as if it's nothing. You'd be over the moon, right? Oh my god, that's my brother. How do you know him? Yeah, that's the kind of thing you'd feel.
Oh, yeah.
You feel so happy, right? I never had this experience myself, but a friend of mine had in India, and they were telling me that they realized that the elderly person they were kind of having this battle with was actually their friend's granddad, their best mate's granddad. And then he was telling me, at that point, completely changed my perspective. And so, the reason we create divisions of such small nature, whereas you're my friend and then your enemy's my enemy, is because we don't have a common connection to them. But as soon as you have a common point of love, a common person that you love, or a common connection, then it becomes very easy to love. So then, the way the Vedic literature goes about understanding this is it says that true love is characterized by loving God. You might say, why? Because if I say that I love some things now, but I cannot love everything, that's because I'm not really connected to everything. As soon as I love God, then I now love, naturally, as part of that, all living entities, all living beings, plants, animals, material nature in general. I'm not gonna, I won't exploit it. I won't use it for my own gain. I'll use it as it's meant to be used, right? I won't look at animals as something inferior to me, something that I can also exploit, but I'll look at them that I should also take care of them. In the same way for plants as well. And so, when we actually learn to love God, then you'll easily learn to love everything, because it's connected. Think of a family member, right? Your dad says, I really like this room. What will you do? If you really love you're going to make sure that room's always in very nice condition, very nicely taken care of. So in that same way, if we develop love for God, we naturally develop love for everyone in that way. It's described, yata taror mula nishechanena triptyanti tat skanda bujopashaka. This is a Sanskrit analogy, which is that by watering the root of the tree, all the branches, leaves and twigs are nourished. You don't have to go individually and take care of each of the parts of the tree. But by focusing on the root alone, naturally, the whole tree is taken care of, right? And by feeding the stomach, then the whole body becomes nourished. You don't have to individually take care of all the different parts of the body. So in that same way, if we try and develop love for God, then we can actually develop love for everyone. Because you can't say, I really like God, but I hate you. You know, you can't really say that. Because you're also connected to God, and so am I. You see? And so when you realize that you have a common connection, naturally love is born. So this is why I use that analogy of the tram. It makes a lot of sense, right? As soon as you realize just how connected you are to this world, you will make sure that you use it in a loving way, and you love the other people around you, the living entities around you, plants, animals, and humans. You'll always develop love for them. And so the trick that's often explained, because to go to there's 8 billion people, to go to every person and develop loving affection is very difficult. But naturally to develop loving affection for everyone, if you love the source of everyone, it's a very easy way of going about doing that. So that's why that's always mentioned. So I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind. Yeah, so coming back now to love, characteristics of love that you were all talking about. The first thing, as we spoke about earlier, love is a verb, not a noun. Selfless service. Sacrifice is naturally a part of love. You've probably heard of this concept of sacrifice many times. You don't feel, when you genuinely love someone, right, like a parent or something, you don't feel it's difficult to take some burden in helping them. Because you see how much this person actually genuinely cares for me. Right? You naturally feel overwhelmed with the feeling of I should help them. I'm thinking of a time that we were asked by someone, very nice person, who took care of us very nicely. And we were asked to prepare something quite late in the kitchen. And so I remember I ran into the kitchen, I was making this ginger tea or something because they were feeling very unwell. And the floor was freezing. If I had to go in that kitchen myself to prepare something, I'd probably think about how bad the cold floor is, and I'm so annoyed about this and that. I remember in that moment, I didn't feel anything. I felt actually like, yeah, I'm feeling quite happy to do this. Because even though the floor is cold, it doesn't matter. It's fine. I'm making ginger tea for this person. I'm feeling very nice. So in that way, when you develop a genuine affection for someone, a sacrifice is not seen as an austerity necessarily. Right? You naturally will be able to take on difficulty without seeing it as much of a difficulty. And the more love you have, the more you'll be able to do that. And so there's this concept of sacrifice in wisdom texts all the time, different kinds of sacrifices. But it's described that if you just develop love for God, you don't need to do any of these kind of sacrifices. Because naturally what you'll do is you'll develop the ability to sacrifice in any way. Right? If I actually love God, what does that mean? I'm going to take care of you. Right? Naturally. I will be able to take on difficulty to help you. And I won't see that as I don't have to separately cultivate austerity and discipline, etc. I can naturally do that. Or service is another thing that's often talked about. Service to society, serving this world, your contribution, not just of making yourself better, you want to make the world better. How can you do that? Well, if you develop love for God, naturally you'll look at every living entity. Not just my friends and family should be better, but every person. Like you're taking care of the homeless on the streets. Naturally you'll feel like that. Animals, the plants, they should also be taken care of. Right? Other people around me, other people that even I don't know. Not just because I'm in the UK, it's so nice, I should disregard the sufferings of the people that are currently in war-torn countries. You will naturally feel the sense of compassion. And so you'll develop service to society. And, this idea of love, therefore, in finding true love, is described that we have to actually remember to love and serve God. And then you might ask, what is that process of developing love for someone? Right? How do you actually develop love for someone? What would you say? What are the things you'd say? How do you develop love for someone?
Get to know them.
You get to?
Get to know them.
Get to know them. Yeah, that's very nice. It's a good start. Yeah.
Spend time with them.
Spend time with them. Get to know them. Serve them. Okay, so do some activity for them. Anything else?
Just sharing experiences with them, whether it's mundane or, exciting.
Okay, so you share experiences with them. Now, all of those things that you said are absolutely correct. They all apply also in our relationship of love with the divine, but okay, maybe I'm not. Okay, let's say you don't have access to the person. Let's say I want to develop love for Abhanka Prabhu, but he's always busy. He just doesn't have time for me. Right? Let's say he doesn't. He's just not accessible to me right now. Right? Right now. How can I develop love for him? Hear about him from?
Other people or things that describe him.
Okay, so hear about him from other people, find out things that describe him. Which other people? I go to a random stranger on the street and say, tell me about Abhanka from.
People that love him.
Right. You hear about him from people that love him. And then what will that do? They'll be like, oh, he does this, this is very nice, this is also, oh wow, this is really good. And then you naturally develop attachment. So okay, so hearing about them from people that love them. And what was the other thing you said? Things as well. Things which also could describe. So another way of finding out. So knowledge is there, knowledge is required. That's good. Anything else? How else is there a...
I guess like, I don't know how to word this. I was thinking for like prepare for like when you can hang out with him. Like if you know that he likes like apples or something, like go and get some apples.
Exactly.
Like, oh, when he comes, you'll really like this.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. You'll when you think of not just my own pleasure, but you think of the pleasure of the other person. Right? This is what defines love. You think of how can I make the other person happy. And I always give the analogy, my best friend Balaram, he doesn't like raisins in sweet rice. Okay? So if and I really like raisins in sweet rice. So if I'm preparing sweet rice for him, and I put raisins in, I've not actually prepared it for him. Right? Because I know that he doesn't like it. Instead what I'll do is I'll see that what he likes, okay, he really likes, for example, he likes pizza, then I'll prepare a pizza. Okay? And I'll make sweet rice without raisins. You'll make sure that the other person is happy. You'll think of the other person's happiness. And genuine relationships, real relationships, are characterized by this mood of constantly reciprocating service. Right? So he'll also think about, oh, you know, this is what Sundar really likes, I'll make these things for him. That's the way that you'll have a loving friendship. It's described once, the famous story of the difference between demigods or divine people and demoniac people. One time, a mystic travels to the heavenly worlds, and to the demoniac worlds, to see what the demoniac people are up to. And he sees that they're all eating a massive meal, but what's happened is they've got a spoon, a huge spoon, attached to their arm, and it's attached in such a way that they can't bend their elbow. Okay? And they're all trying to put the spoon into the food and trying to eat it, and it's just going over their head, because they can't actually eat it. And then when he goes to the place of the divine people, they've all got the spoons, and they're all eating, but you know how they're eating? How? They're feeding each other. Everyone's picking up and then giving to the person next to them. You know? No one's thinking just about how I can help me, but they're thinking about how I can serve others. And you know why love actually works, no matter what people say? People like to disregard this and say, no, you should of course take care of yourself. I'm not saying that you shouldn't take care of yourself. When you care for yourself, then only one person is caring about you. And when you cultivate a group in such a way, or a society in such a way, that everyone cares for themselves, only one person cares for them. Right? In a group of 50 people, if everyone only cares for themselves, then only one person is caring for them. But if everyone cares for the well-being of everyone else, then 49 people love you. 49 people are looking out for you, not just yourself. And so, developing this constant mood of reciprocated service is a characteristic of genuine affection. It's where your heart will feel much more at ease. And yeah, go on.
So how do you balance, like, let's say if it's not reciprocated, right? But like obviously you still want, you want to love everyone because everyone is, like, how do you manage that then?
Okay. I'm going to get back to you. Remind me if I forget. Okay. And coming back to this point of thinking of the welfare of others, thinking of the pleasure of others, if you want to naturally develop, as we were talking about love for God, if you want to naturally develop that, well, what do you have to do? You have to, if you cannot access God, then what do? You spend time with people that have developed love for God, no matter which religion, no matter which system of faith. If people have genuinely developed love for God, you'll see it in the characteristics of how they love everyone in this world and how they behave with everyone. They don't behave in a rash and a rude manner. They're very gentle, very kind, very loving, very charming and relaxing, simple people. You'll see that. And so, in the same way that if I don't know Abhyanga Prabhu, I'll hear from people that know about him, and so I'll develop that. This is the same way that we can do that with God, and it's love and knowledge, they go hand in hand. Knowledge of someone and love for someone, they will go together. You cannot love someone without knowing about them. And so that's why we have so many deep wisdom texts which explore the actual activities of the divine, what the divine looks like, what the divine does, in very much depth, so that you can develop a lot of love in that way. So I just wanted to get that one thing. And the second thing I also wanted to say is, when you're thinking for the pleasure of the divine, then you actually also think for the pleasure of all. Because in doing so, like, I love God, but I hate all of his kids. Like, it doesn't work, you know? You naturally love everyone. And so, when we think, it's described, samsiddhir haritoshanam, we think about how to make the divine happy. Every action that we do, we try and run it past that idea. Like, by my actions that I'm carrying out, will this please God or not? Will this please the divine or not? And if you change your thought process to having that check every time you start trying to fulfill that, you will see naturally you will contribute far more to society. You'll think about the welfare of all. You'll think about how we can create peace in the world at large, not just within our small groups of friends, but also amongst society at large. How can we make an actual change? And you'll look at you'll look at helping individuals on all levels. His Holiness Radhanath Swami explains that when you actually care for the well-being of someone, you'll take care of all aspects of their identity, which are the physical, the body. So those who are in bodily distress, you'll provide, for example, food for those who cannot have food. Mental, so physical is the body, mental is kind of the mind. You know, they're having some distress, you'll speak to them, right? Naturally, what you'll do is you'll speak to them, you'll talk to them, see how you can help in their situations. If they have some difficulty, you share that problem and you can overcome that. And spiritual, right? Providing them some inspiration through spirituality as well, whether it be spiritual books or spiritual practices such as meditation, mantra meditation, chanting, eating spiritual foods, spending time with other spiritual people. So you'll connect to them on all these different levels, naturally. And in this way, you'll think about how to make them happy. So developing a mood of servitude to God and a servitude to all go hand in hand, right? And it's by developing a mood of serving God that you naturally develop how to serve all. Because otherwise, if we try and do the other way around, we will only serve those who we like, and we will not serve those who we don't like or our friends don't like. So if you want to go and break those barriers and boundaries, you have to think on a really kind of high level. You have to move your consciousness to that thinking. Okay, coming back to your point, what was the other thing again?
It was like, let's say if the love is not
reciprocated,
or if like, you know, you just don't get along with someone or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, but you know, you still want to cultivate love for God, so you can cultivate love for everyone. How do you manage that?
Okay, that's a good. Okay, let's say you're a parent and you have a kid who's really, really like unhealthy. And your kid says to you, "Dad, I really want chocolate right now. I really want chocolate. It's going to make me the happiest kid in the world." As a parent, what would you do?
Not good with chocolate.
Why?
Just make them more healthy.
It'll make them more unhealthy, yeah?
It'd be worse in the long run.
So it's actually not good for them. So you realise that they don't actually know, for example, that their happiness, in this case, won't actually be satisfied by having chocolate, although they think that. You actually do what's good for them, right? Similarly, what happens at times is that there are conflicts of interest between people, and for some reason or another that reciprocation is not there. Either they think that what you're doing is useless, or they don't care, they're simply not interested, or there's so many reasons, right, why reciprocation doesn't occur. But still, if you think of everyone in the same way a parent thinks of their kid, sometimes the kid gets so angry at the parents, and he's like, I'm not going to talk to them for the rest of the day. But what do the parents do? Do they stop? No. They'll still come, they'll still speak to you, they'll still be, nice to you, and they'll still try and encourage you in the things which are correct, right? This is what the parents do. And so, in that same way, when people around us, they may not get along with us. I mean, actually not me. People won't get along with you sometimes. That is just the nature of the world, right? There is no happy society in which you will always have no enemies. The Vedic literature has a funny irony in this sense that, have any of you heard of the Mahabharata? Yeah? The Mahabharata, there's a person called Yudhishthira, who's on the side of good, and his name is Ajatashatru, which means to have no enemy. But if you know the story of the Mahabharata, he actually gets into a massive fight. And so there's, even for someone that's so peaceful, even he, although his name literally means one who has no enemy, there's still some enemies there. So even if you are such an amazing person, you will have some people that don't reciprocate that love, naturally, always. But still, you should feel a sense of duty that even if this other person is being harsh or unkind, I should develop a tolerance such that I'm able to help them out in what actually matters. So I should tell them what's right, for example, even if it's unpalatable for them to hear it. Or I should act in a way which is correct, even if they find that difficult. Does that make sense?
Also, wouldn't in some cases also it be appropriate for, the most loving thing to do to not actually be friends with that person?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that's, yeah.
Yeah.
But so yeah, you're saying the way of being best friends is by not being friends with them at the time. That's a way to be an actual friend to them at that time.
Yeah.
I
don't know.
Do you have a specific example of? I mean, without going into details.
No. It's not a specific example. It's more just because obviously you can't be friends with everyone, right? That is you can't be on the same.
Maybe you cannot be as close to everyone, but
Yeah.
you can actually be friends with, even those who we currently hate right now. We can find ways of developing even love for them. It's difficult. One of the methods that is given is, I don't know if you've heard of spiritualist as a bumblebee. A spiritualist is compared to a bumblebee. So bumblebee goes to every flower, and what does it do? It gets honey from every flower, no matter where the flower is. And so, in that way, an easy way of going about even people that we have so many things against. I'm not saying another person is justified in all their improper actions, but you go to every individual, and no matter what's bad about them, you look for some positive quality there, and then try and develop in that way that kind of affection. Sorry, I'm going to come back to you in a minute. I don't have anything against you.
I agree with that. So I should word it differently. Maybe not friend. I agree you can have a love for everyone.
Yeah.
Right? But still, let's say association, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If you know that someone is not a good influence or something like that, but you still want to have love for them, and obviously you're not going to spend
Sure,
loads of time.
yeah.
That's what I was
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so,
I still agree with him. I still kind of agree with what he's saying with the friend thing as well.
no, so okay, I think
But
friend
you
is a little
can
bit
say
different.
You can have love for everyone. You can cultivate love for being okay,
Mm-hmm.
I love you as.
It depends on your tolerance level and your personal strength, right? In terms of I always give the example of a 50-year-old is sorry, not 50-year-old, maybe you are punching me versus a kid punching me.
Yeah.
I can't take them the same way. So in that same way, I don't know why I'm thinking of Veronica hitting me all the time. if it's someone that has the ability to have an influence on you and actually affect you, then to say no is fine. But what happens is with spiritual practice, you develop such a tolerance over time that instead of being, that's why I use the analogy of a parent and a child. Naturally, you become more like the parent. You have a more tolerance level, higher tolerance level. But in that moment, of course, you will say no. Before you try and help someone out of water, it's said that you must stand on firm ground. Or in the aeroplanes, they always say before you put the oxygen mask on your kid, you first put it on yourself.
Yeah.
That is always there. I do agree. So in that moment, you have to choose your own thing. but it's done so that later on you can do that.
Wow.
So even if you're selfish, it's actually to be selfless. Even if it appears selfish initially. Like when you're taking care of your physical health, that's not a selfish thing because you're doing that why? To serve. So it's actually selfless. You were gonna say?
No, I think you kind of resolved it. But I think with like this, pardon?
Resolve the beef.
No, it's not beautiful, but you're kind of, because I think sometimes like with love we can have a cliche in our mind of what it looks like to love someone, but also that we love everyone in the same way, or not everyone, or there's only one type of love. Obviously you differentiate different relationships, but then love should change based on the person and context, right? And
well, the way, exactly, the actual nature of that love is very different.
Which is kind of what you were saying about, just because you loving everyone doesn't mean you agree with everyone and you let everyone do whatever they want and you don't have any differing views, right? So like going back to your point of like if you don't, you don't, like you said, so you might not get along with someone, and it's like obviously if you're spiritually a lot more advanced, then you can kind of, like you said, you can kind of transcend that and kind of understand, we have differing natures, but we have this ultimate thing. But like someone like me, I'm not there yet, so then it's like maybe understanding that I can appreciate them from a distance, but then also understand that for me our natures are so conflicting that it's probably best for me to keep a certain distance. But it doesn't mean I don't love them, it just means out of respect for them, say we're working on different projects or something, you kind of let them do whatever they want to do. It doesn't mean I don't love them.
Absolutely.
My way of loving
that's
them
correct.
is to give them
Yeah, that's
space,
correct. So
and
like
I'm not going to be
I always see this, which is one of those fascinating things about spiritualists, and I might have mentioned it on that KCSoc retreat that we all went to. Which was, I saw Keshav Swami, huge inspiration for me, and he was dancing with everyone. He was so humble, and he was like mixing with everyone so freely, and he was so relaxed. And that's when I realized that the more one becomes spiritual, the more they're able to mix with a wider group of people, right? The more your horizons actually broaden, because you have such a tolerance level that like he's seeing with so much humility and so much attitude of service, and he's so fixed in his own spiritual practice that nothing's going to cause him problem. Whereas, in that initial part of our spiritual journey, sometimes we initially have to narrow our circle initially, so that we can then focus a little bit on improving ourselves before we actually go on to broaden that circle. But the spiritualist always sees that long-term vision of, although I might be currently narrowing that, I'm doing it so that in the long run I can become broader. There's so many stories in like the Vedic text. There's a story of a person called Vidura. Vidura is expelled from his kingdom by the kind of the evil rulers at the time. And after the great war of the Mahabharata happens, he comes back. And those people that actually were the family that pushed him out, he goes to them and he tells them with quite harsh words. He says like, "You're living here like a dog," is what he actually says. But he explains like, what are you doing? You're forgetting such an important thing in life. And so it looks like he actually initially walked away. It looks like he left everyone, but he actually comes back and then inspires everyone again. Like about you've forgotten this most important thing. You become so materially attached. You should forget these things and come back to your spiritual purpose. And so in that way, it looks like Vidura walked off, but he actually came back. So in that way, our mood should always be that even if right now I might look like I'm taking one step back, it's only so I can take 2 steps forward in the future. So that's our approach. And I had a few things I wanted to say. Just coming back to this point of unconditional love. You can only get unconditional love from an unconditional person. Makes sense, right? The closest you have, the scriptures describe as the love between a mother and a child is the closest you can get in this world. But still, even then, the mother is conditioned by things because they're also a person in this world. So if you want unconditional love, you have to get from an unconditional person, and that person is not conditioned by material nature. So who is that person? God, but there's also more. The unconditional people are also those who actually have developed love for God, because they also will have that property of being unconditional. And so when we look at unconditional love, sometimes I've seen people kind of philosophically look into wisdom texts like the Bhagavad Gita, and they'll take just philosophical points out of it. But they forget a very deep point, which is the whole of that text revolves around love. Krishna says that, like, Arjuna, I'm telling you this, why? Because I love you so much. Ishtosi me dridham iti. I have a deep affection for you. I deeply love you, and that's why I'm speaking this to you. So all of this kind of spiritual life that we will discuss so many things, so many philosophical points, so many practical applications. But we should not forget that long-term vision, which is that we're trying to develop love ultimately for the divine. And in doing so, we will end up creating a way that we can actually love everyone. And so I want to keep this point in mind, that when you're going on your spiritual journey, don't look at it as just a way of regulation. Don't look at it as a way of just making progress. But also remember that it's also a way of becoming more loving. Every single day, we should be seeing that I am becoming a more loving person because of my spiritual practice. Otherwise, you will learn philosophy, you will learn knowledge, you might even get discipline, but you will become hard-hearted and you'll become selfish. And that's why you will see sometimes that people that do meditation are more selfish than those who don't do meditation. Sometimes. Because what they do is their goal of meditation is all about how can I be better and then stop there. It's not how can I be better and how can I serve others better. So if we keep that mindset, then we will not actually develop this love that we're talking about. But we want to see that day by day, our love for God is growing. And in turn, our love for the world and how to take care of others is also growing. So we have to use that as an indicator of our spiritual journey. So that's quite important. Yeah, thank you all so much. That's this talk. Thank you.